Good morning, brothers and sisters, and welcome back to 4 Hour Day, which is a show where we look at the scriptures and look at real life and say, gee, there seems to be a correlation here. Very little in this world is truly unprecedented. We can look at the scriptures to learn all sorts of things about our day. We can learn about petty tyrants, and we can learn about disease, and we can learn about the things that are inflicting our world today. The land of Australia, that place that's full of so many things that can kill you, has been completely locked down because of a little bug going around that can kill you, admittedly, but it's not as dangerous to you, especially if you're vaccinated, as, say, like a lightning strike. So people have given up their freedom for something that is barely an issue. And these poor people are subject to the whims of petty tyrants, health officials who nobody voted for. They just got put into a position of power by a corrupt system. And the power has been stripped away from the people to whom it rightly belongs. Now, this is not unprecedented. In fact, there's a great story from the Book of Mormon regarding a man called Alma, who had to deal with this exact problem. Alma was a priest in the court of a wicked king, and he was taught by another man named Abinadi, and unlike the other priests who they killed Abinadi, Alma believed him, and what he did, we can learn a great deal from the example of Alma. Alma was the leader of a small group of people who were subject unto some tyranny. Despite their best efforts to avoid it, they were without power to really do anything about their predicament. And here's their plight. Let me lay it down for you as it is explained in the scriptures. Now it came to pass that Amulon began to exercise authority over Alma and his brethren, and began to persecute them, and cause that his children should persecute their children. For Amulon knew Alma, that he had been one of the king's priests, and it was he that had believed the words of Abinadi, and was driven out before the king, and therefore he was wroth with him, for he was subject to King Laban. Yet he exercised authority over them, and put tasks upon them, and put taskmasters over them. And it came to pass that so great were their afflictions, that they began to cry mightily to God. And Amulon commanded them that they must stop their cries. And he put guards over them to watch them, that whosoever should be found calling upon God should be put to death. And Alma and his people did not raise their voices to the Lord their God, but did pour out their hearts to him, and he did know the thoughts of their hearts. And it came to pass that the voice of the Lord came to them in their affliction, saying, Lift up your head and be of good comfort, for I know of the covenant which ye have made unto me, and I will covenant with my people, and deliver them out of bondage. These poor people were too few in number to rise up and take back their freedom. They were humble followers of God, and they submitted themselves temporarily to the whims of tyrants, knowing that God would deliver them. And yet, I don't actually believe that any of them fully complied with this lesser law, the law of a petty tyrant that was under the law of God. Because the law of God teaches a man that he must pray, and yet this lesser law was teaching them that they must not pray, else they should be put to certain death. And these people were not unaccustomed to breaking the law, if you know what I mean. As we learn earlier in the story, Alma, who had fled from the servants of King Noah, repented of his sins and iniquities, and went about privately among the people and began to teach the words of Abinadi, regarding redemption and the power of Christ. And as many as would hear his word he did teach, and he taught them privately, that it might not come to the knowledge of the king, and many believed his words. I can't imagine that it was different when they were commanded not to pray. I don't think they actually stopped praying. Now, it doesn't say that, but they were no strangers to resisting tyranny subtly and privately, breaking these rules that were completely unjust. They were completely justified in defying these orders, these lockdowns, if you will. They most likely would still have gathered in private to pray and teach one another the word of God. But they didn't let it come to the knowledge of the king. That is exactly what Alma had done earlier in the story, where it says, "Now there was in Mormon a fountain of pure water, and Alma resorted thither, there being near the water a thicket of small trees where he did hide himself in the daytime from the searches of the king." This Alma was no stranger to threats to his life, and yet he did the right thing anyway. He taught people, despite the fact that he was probably going to die. Now, the Lord delivered him. He was spared so that he could continue his work. But he was willing to die. He had learned from the best, from Abinadi, who actually did die. And he was willing to put himself on the line to do what's right. And yet he didn't let the knowledge of his illegal acts come to the knowledge of the king. And that is a great example to each of us today, where just the worst sort of people have been put in charge of us and demand that we comply with their ridiculous mandates, which are not based in any data, but clearly the whole point is forcing you to comply. You give up your freedom so that they can be in charge. They want power. It is one of those basic things that is not unprecedented. Bad people will always do what gives them power and what takes it away from the meek and the lowly in heart. Each of us should be following the higher law. And if that means that we have to sneak out at night in order to visit the sick and the afflicted, do it. If that means that we must pray vocally, and if we have to keep our meetings private, that they might not come to the knowledge of the health officials, that is what we should do. That's my child. She's been sick, and she just woke up. I am not a very well-worded man, but this much I do know is true. God does not want us to submit to every whim of petty tyrants. I think he would be understanding if we're going to, say, lose our lives or livelihoods. And every situation is different. Abinadi was commanded to go and teach the king. But Alma learned from that, and he was not called on to put his life on the line. But he was called to teach the people in private, that it might not come to the knowledge of those who would kill them if they found out about it. I don't think too many people in our world today are being threatened with death, but they are being threatened with being locked in their homes and having every freedom stripped from them, which they already have. Brothers and sisters, let us resist evil, and whatsoever evil we cannot resist with our words, let us resist with our swords. I don't think we're to that point yet, but get ready, because it's going to come sooner than we hope. And in the meantime, do not cease to pray. Do not cease to gather with the saints. Do not cease to minister to the sick and the afflicted. For those are the things that Jesus commanded us to do. And just because some health officials said, don't talk to each other while you're at the store, that doesn't override the commandments of God. So do what is right and not what is easy. And do what is good and not what is legal. So I'll leave that with you there, and I hope that I'm not very inspiring, but I hope that the Spirit has inspired you. And we'll get out of this sooner or later. Don't lose faith. Keep praying. We can do it.